Hey guys, Erin Jane here. Just wanted to jump on quickly and remind you that this is part 2 of my conversation with Mr. Travis Gribble, founder of My Arena. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, I implore you to go back and listen to that episode first, as Travis's story and experience is compelling, raw, and important to understand in its entirety. Part 2 picks up where part 1 left off, so go listen if you haven't already. Otherwise, please enjoy episode 6, part 2 of my conversation with the inspirational Travis Gribble. I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness, a first responder mental health podcast hosted by me, Erin Jane, where we have conversations about what it's like to perform a first responder role and the mental health challenges that can accompany it. I know we veered off on a tangent, so I apologize about that. I sort of want to go back to obviously, challenging job, and you kindly spoke about how like the ways that you were kind of trying to cope, and obviously they were fairly maladaptive. At what point did you realize something was truly wrong in regards to going or your mindset changing to go, I actually need to go get some help, or I need to go talk to someone? Like, was there one moment, one instance? What happened?
That whole getting me to that step is a long process, but I first actually went to go get help in 2017 because I knew that something wasn't right, but I went to our peer officer, which is, I don't know if you know what peer is, but it's support for
support,
yeah. And I lied to him because I just said, hey, been through a divorce. I've got child custody issues with my ex-wife. I just need who do we go see? And so he told me this name, and it was actually someone that was employed. Some departments, they have paid members that do the therapy and all that. So I took this name and I went, and it, quite honestly, Aaron, it was a shitty experience. And then my ownership, I was not telling him everything because I was kind of feeling things out to see if, what this was going to be like. And I mentioned about, thinking that I was drinking too much. I mentioned about sleep, but I didn't tell him night terrors. And he just said, well, why don't you just not drink on the days that you're working, and then, sleep? Travis, sorry. You chose this career. Shift work sucks. You're working night shift. Just real nonchalant, right? So I was like, all right. So it kind of was a double-edged sword, because I would leave there and I'm like, well, I guess what I'm doing is okay. I'll just keep pushing along. I went in a total of 4 times. And then the last time is when I disclosed about Ruby. Mm-hmm. And I've seen all of his notes, because when I put in for my retirement, I had to provide all the shit from every therapist that I've been to. And he just put in quotations, distressed about girl in bag. And then it was a total intake form of hey, you should, the forms recommend EMDR, recommend CBT, recommend time off from work, nothing. Yep. And then his thing was told to come back when he's feeling stressed again. And that's all I got. So I walked out there. I know. I walk out of there. I'm like, fuck this. I'm done with therapy. And I didn't have a good.
Who could blame you?
Yeah. I didn't have a good impression of therapists to begin with. So this kind of fed into it. So I was like, fuck it. I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. When I'm stressed, drink. I guess I'm just having panic attacks. I guess that's just normal. Suck it up. Keep going. And then in 2018, then I get the word that I'm going to go back to the team. And so I'm like, okay, this is what I need. I need to just get away from the streets, get back with my brothers, and all will be fine and dandy. But that wasn't the case. We were busier than ever. And then also, my wife and I, now we got married in 2017, and she was a police officer in Mesa as well. Okay. And she worked internet crimes against children. So, of course, they have to deal with all the nasty stuff. And her unit was the only unit at Mesa that was required to go see a therapist once per quarter. Okay. Which is good, and they deserved it. But they were actually going to see that person that I was, had a terrible, did not like him either. And in fact, it's disgusting, but funny. Then the nail in the coffin was, as one of her partners was in there in session, and he stopped the session to take a phone call on a real estate deal in the office. Oh yeah, it was fucked up.
Oh my God.
So
Jeez.
yeah, so they said, nope, we are not going to go anymore unless we can find somebody else. So they ended up finding this organization called Public Safety Crisis Solutions. And that's where Jennifer Cooper, that I, was my therapist that I now, speak with, she was located, and they started to go see her. So my wife was in the background through all this, like, you need to go see Jen. You need to go see Jen. We love him. I knew her partners, a couple old salty guys that I never would think would go to therapy. And they're like, no, they love her too.
Yeah.
But Aren, I just kept pushing it off, to be quite honest with you. And it was very easy to say I was busy, because as a team leader, I mean, we were working on, and that was definitely one of my coping mechanisms, because I felt most comfortable when I was at work. When I was at home is when all this shit started rambling. It's where I drank more. So me being at work was an easy way to mask, or try to mask, all my shit.
Yep.
So, yeah. And I mean, if you're ready for me to go there, I pushed it all the way until 2021, until my last day of work. Is there anything you want to ask about that, or you want me to go into how that all happened?
No, you can just keep going.
Okay. So so all the shit was piling up, and I finally, in January of 2021, I told my wife, I said, hey, I'll go see Jen. So I made an appointment, and I had some other breakdowns, like in the fall of 2020, I was in Michigan and Ohio visiting family with Emily, my wife, and just a couple random, just telling someone that I had no business telling about Ruby, and just lost it, just blubbering, sobbing. So like shit was adding up. And I was having, cry sessions all the time by myself, like driving in the car. Just, I knew it wasn't good. And so I said, okay, I'll make this appointment. Well, when I made the appointment, I didn't tell Jen that I was in crisis or anything like that. She's like, all right, the next appointment I have was in March, which, I just said, I think I probably need to get someone, or see someone. So I was real nonchalant about it.
Yep.
So, no shit. This is on a Monday in 2021. I was team leader, obviously, at this point. I was pulling into Jennifer's parking lot to go for my first session, and a suspect barricade situation kicked off back in Mesa. And so this is easy for me, because I'm like, oh, cool, I don't have to go. So I get a hold of Jen. I canceled the appointment, and I raced back to Mesa. We handled, ended up having to use gas and stuff. Pretty typical for us on the suspect, getting him out in custody, no big deal.
Yeah.
And then we go home. And then I was home for like 45 minutes. And I get a call from Lieutenant, one of our SWAT lieutenants, saying that there was a hostage rescue call that was kicking off. And the call circumstances were that and this was in a nice area of Mesa. We had some very nice, well-to-do east side of Mesa neighborhoods. This little girl had exited her house and ran over the neighbors. She had been shot in the arm, and her arm was almost severed, and she had been badly beaten. And she told the neighbors the suspect is my dad, and inside the house is still my mom and 18-year-old sister. So I'm getting this information, and like, yep, this is probably going to be a hostage rescue. And so we all, obviously the whole team's going there. And there's a couple different types of hostage rescues that can happen as far as the planning goes. There's either what's called a deliberate plan, which means like I have hours, I'm on scene, we're negotiating, blah, blah, blah. Or there's a hasty or emergency, which means, hey, shit's kicking off. I don't have time to plan. We just got to go do the work. And so I've kind of figured that's what this was going to be, because he had already committed violence and he was inside with people. So sure enough, get there, get a little bit more information. And we come up with a plan to go to the back of the house, shotgun breach on the patio door, drop the glass, and make entry. And inside, we find a male deceased, obvious deceased with gunshot wound to the head. And then on the other side of the couch in this great room was a female that turns out to be mom, obvious deceased with gunshot wound to the head. Scene's pretty horrific. There's a lot of blood, and it wasn't registering with me why there was so much blood away from the bodies.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out it was that little girl. What happened at the top of the stairs is he comes after her, beats her heavily. She falls to the ground. He shoots. She's really a hero little girl. She's 9 years old. She played dead. And so we believe that he probably thought she was dead, so didn't keep shooting. And when he went back downstairs, she kind of snuck out of the house. But as she's traveling outside the house, there's blood everywhere.
Yeah.
So we work our way, clear the bottom stairs, go upstairs. I end up in a room with my best friend and just a warrior SWAT guy, just done everything.
Mm-hmm.
And we clear in this room, but unfortunately in the bed was 18-year-old sister, obvious deceased with gunshot wound to the head. My buddy, immediately as we get it cleared and he kind of looks down, I see him, I see emotion starting. I'm like, unusual for him. Never seen anything like this. But I looked down, immediately clicked. The girl laying in the bed looked just like his, at the time, 18-year-old daughter. And so, you know how everyone says they have a twin, and I swear to God, it was her laying in that bed. And so it just rocked him. Pretty horrific scene. I didn't know all of what I was feeling until going to therapy, and then multiple operators are inside the house. They've been through therapy, and then we've all been able to talk about stuff. But it was the first time I had ever been a part of a hostage rescue where we didn't either kill the suspect or go in and take the suspect in custody and rescue the hostages or negotiate all the hostages out. So I was going in that house thinking we were going to rescue everyone. And so it kicked my ass, and just that was the call that pushed me over the edge. I mean, we immediately, we came into work the next day, but we weren't okay. I was not okay. Jen ended up getting in to see me then. So we come into work the next day. That's a Tuesday. On Wednesday, she got me in, and I just vomited finally everything of what I was going through. And we decided to take me offline, and I never went back to work in that, on shift. So,
Wow.
Yeah. I know.
That's a lot.
There's a lot.
I mean, thank you for sharing all of that. Again, like similar to, the Ruby experience, it can't be easy to rehash that constantly.
Yeah.
So you were thankfully taken offline and obviously agreed to that.
Yeah.
Tell me what the process was like for you to find any kind of way back to feeling like yourself, or feeling healed, or, being okay.
A lot of, I mean, Jen is a perfect example of, I know the term of a culturally competent first responder therapist, because she knew as soon as she got me in that room, that first session especially, that there was going to be some work that needed to be done. I mean, I let this shit go on for a long time.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I had to have buy-in. She built trust and rapport with me, which was huge. She definitely takes her therapy. She calls it from a relationship standpoint, Yeah. I get emotional talking about her, but
she's impacted your life in a remarkable way. Makes sense.
To know, I mean, she's very specific where she says, hey, I'm walking alongside you. Any place I ask you to go, I'm going to pull you back out because, and she was referring to what I was going to have to go through EMDR therapy. And then, she came up with a plan. Like I was going in twice a week. And then I also, and I was shocked I did this because I was always very adamantly against it. She had me meet with a psychiatrist that she works with to get me on medication. Because she knew that I was not sleeping, and she needed me to get rest and stuff like that. So they put me on 3 different types of PTSD medication that I would take before bed, just so I get some damn rest finally. And then also what she calls a rescue medication. I'm terrible at pronouncing, so I won't. That I would take before and after session. It's just kind of like take the edge off a little bit. Propanerol, like that, I think is what it's called.
But I think as well, like part of helping you heal, especially in the immediacy of after like attending that job and going to get in to see her in a state of crisis, like she would need you to be stabilized, because if you're in that crisis state, there's no, like, you've got to be brought down to a certain level before you actually can begin to start healing.
Well, you actually, you are obviously trained in this, and that's one of the things we go through when we speak stages of therapy. Stages of therapy. One is stabilization. That's the first thing she has to get through, and there's a whole process for that. She has to make sure I'm safe. Because I admitted in that session that I had thought of suicide before. But it wasn't like the nail in the coffin. I was like, of course she goes through checks and balances. I'm like, no, I had thought about it. It was always an option on the table for me. I knew I could do it. And like, okay, well, that's different than you're sitting in your truck 5 minutes ago with a gun in your mouth. That's totally different. Which was a surprise. That's another thing we lie to first responders about, that like, well, if you think of suicide ever, nope, you can't be a police officer. You can't be a fighter. Complete fucking lie. That's not the case. It's actually very normal to have passive ideations of suicide in our profession. So, and that was the first time I'd ever heard of that shit, and, but the medication was brilliant. It didn't work overnight, but once I finally started getting some rest, like, holy shit. And I needed it, right? Because like you said, to bring me down to that other level to start working on the shit that I had going on in my head. And we hammered for, I was twice a week for 9 months, I think. So because I had, the EMDR does not have to be a long process. The unfortunate part of the Ruby case was I had let that shit fester and had come up with so many negative beliefs, negative emotions that we had to work through so many little pieces versus, just last week, okay, I had a shooting or whatever, and I'm struggling with this. Okay, let's get in and target something specific. But for me, it wasn't like that with Ruby because I let it go for too long.
And I can imagine, given all you've seen over your career too, like, probably wasn't even just like the Ruby case as well. Like, there could have been so many others that, once you started unpacking or emptying your cup or whatever analogy you want to use, like, I'm sure it kind of flipped the lid on a couple of others that you were like, oh, like, I didn't think that was an issue, but fuck me, it actually was, and I just ignored it.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because Jen always says, she describes it, well, your brain, they saw, oh, you could deal with that call. Okay, guess what? Here's another one we got for you to deal with. And just, for instance, recently, I have a new therapist here in Montana that I do some stuff with. And gosh, probably 2 months ago, I went and did EMDR over my shooting from 2005 because I had one specific thing about that shooting that I was having intrusive thoughts of his body laying there. And that was something new that had come up to me. It wasn't giving me nightmares or anything, but it'd be like, okay, talking to Emily, and all of a sudden, boom, there's his image. Like, didn't like that. And so I went, and the fun thing about that, it's crazy to call EMDR fun. It was exciting, I guess, because I now knew how EMDR worked. And I'm like, I walk into this session, like, I'll tell you where we need to get to. Let's get to this point, and I'm going to address this. And we did it. And I cleared that image, in a session. Not, and you know how it works, but those listening, it's not like, I can see that image as I'm telling you right now, but it's not intrusively disrupting my life. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm in control of it. It's back in storage. I
Yeah.
can recall it if I need to, like we are in this conversation, but it's not
Yeah.
intrusive.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I caught up with some of my husband went to military college and he had his 30-year reunion a couple of weekends ago. And one of his mates was sent to Afghanistan during the war on terror and stuff. And we were talking about something and he sort of was like, oh, I see the work you're doing and blah, blah, blah. And I think it's really awesome. And then I was telling him about my studies for psychology and counseling, to obviously become a therapist for first responders and how I want to get qualified in EMDR when that point comes. And I love hearing so much about like the way you talk about it and your passion about it and how successful it's been for you. And his head just like was on a freaking swivel because he just turned to me and was like, you know what that is? Because it's just something that like not a lot of people talking about. And I'm like, yeah, I know about it and I'm really interested in it and I want to become a practitioner in it. And he was saying like he had this one scene that haunted him for fucking years. Like, and even to the point where he would call my husband at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and he, not going to like speak out of turn, but basically he'd get up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night and just see blood and dead people on his bedroom floor in between the bathroom and his bed. And it was just, he just could not shake it. And he actually went through EMDR like years ago and it was like experimental at that stage. And his therapist was like, I really want to try this on you. And and he actually like the quote of what he said to me, he's like, EMDR saved my life.
I say that all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I probably would say, like you say, how many people know about it? I always ask, how many people have heard of EMDR when I'm doing my, seminars? It's maybe 25% have heard of it. So we've got a big way to go, but, and then
out there
also,
more, but
sure. My opinion is if you're going to be a therapist that wants to deal with first responders or veterans, like you have to be trained in that because it is life-changing and I think it's a therapy that we can relate to because it's not a lot of sit across the couch and tell me about your feelings. It's like, no, let's get to fucking work and deal with the problem that I have and you get it and you can clear it,
Yeah. And like the best way that I think, when people sort of aren't really sure like what it's about. And I was talking to my husband's friend about it and I said, what I like about it, it puts you kind of in the driver's seat, but it doesn't make you forget it, but it takes away the emotionality attached to it. And he was like, that's like the best explanation that I've heard. Like, and it helps, your mind's like reprocess it and put it back to where it's meant to be. But you're never going to forget it, but to not be so heavily affected by it where it impacts your life and your sleep and like your intrusive thoughts and all that kind of thing. I mean, trying to function when you're in that state, it's just so I love hearing you talk about it. I think it's brilliant. And like you're saying, it's if you want to be a practitioner in that space of helping veterans and first responders, it doesn't necessarily have to, because it won't necessarily work for everyone, but it needs to be a tool in your toolkit.
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
Yep. And so from what you've sort of spoken about over your career, and you've been like brutally honest and said, like what, like that you consciously like just like was like, fucking, I'm not going to deal with anything. And you just packed it all down and all that sort of thing. And then you've kind of come to the end of that spectrum where you're like, fuck, I actually have like a lot of shit to deal with. Like how has your mindset like changed? Like, I guess, you've kind of got like new Travis over here and old Travis over there. Like, how do you kind of reconcile those two parts of yourself?
Well, that's a good question. I've never been asked that. Well, I think it's very important to know that old self is it's always there.
Yeah.
I think what's different is I'm definitely more aware of what's going on in my head and what's going on in my body to where For instance, I mean, I still have a temper that would like to show its head at times, but I'm very aware of knowing, like, okay, I feel it coming. What can I do to help to stop me from getting there? Not that
Yep.
I'm perfect, I still make mistakes, but I guess, yeah, just very aware. I'm still Travis. I still, dealt with all this shit in my career. Um, I don't regret any of it. It is, I would not be who I am today if I had
Mm-hmm.
not been through my experiences, right?
Yep.
But how do I reconcile it? I definitely, I've taken charge of, me controlling my mind more and my body more versus it controlling, me. And
Yep.
so I don't know if that's the answer. I guess that's kind of, yeah,
No,
kind of, yeah, yeah,
it's truthful, so it makes sense to me.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and I think as well, like, you I guess you sort of spoke about the also like not necessarily maybe a mindset, but like an attitude towards sort of like the mental health and
Mhm,
maybe I don't know if you sort of mentioned it here or like on other podcasts and stuff, how, we all back then may have judged other people for their mental health
mhm,
failings a lot more harshly. Coming full circle, and I guess I want to quantify that by you probably will always feel like a work in progress, but
mhm.
given where you're at now and your level of understanding and compassion and all that kind of thing, has it made you sort of either think about or taken the step to go back and have like reconciling conversations with, I don't know, maybe like your children or not necessarily your ex-wife? I don't know what kind of relationship you have with her, but even like people from back when you were a significantly different person compared to now.
hmm I definitely have, for sure. So start with family. I've definitely, my boys, talk about them all the time, but yeah, I definitely was quite frankly an asshole, for a lot of their teenage years, just because I was dealing or not dealing with my shit appropriately. And
Yeah.
I would take out on them, just yelling, losing my temper, whatever it is. And
Yeah.
they now both, they're older, they're 18 and 19. They both know what I've been through. So I've been able to explain, what exactly this looks like dad went through,
Yeah.
not as an excuse,
Yeah.
but telling them that, like, hey, I'm sorry. And now we joke about some shit that I was just super hardcore about stuff with them. And then,
Yeah.
yeah, extended family, just hearing from them that, yeah, there was times where Travis, we're walking on eggshells because we knew you were about ready to pop.
Yeah.
So yeah, having to reconcile that. And then as for professionally, anybody that I know that maybe heard me speak, in a negative way towards people coming forward in my past, I
Mhm.
have definitely sought them out. There's one specific person that I ran into him recently, and I know specifically, I don't even know if they knew, but I was talking shit about some problems they were having based on a traumatic incident they've been involved in, and I had to reconcile with them.
Yeah.
I had, like, as soon as I found out we were going to be in the same area, I'm like, yep, I got to go to him now.
Yeah.
And he was super appreciative. Actually, didn't even like, man, I don't even remember you saying that stuff, but I sure did.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's it. And I, in my presentations, I talk about that. Like, I was
Mhm.
disgusting. Our team was disgusting in that aspect. They now are different because
Yeah.
after I came forward, but yeah, gosh, man, we used to say, yep, oh, you had a hard time with that shooting? Shouldn't be a police officer. And if you
Yeah.
decide to stay in this profession, you sure as hell will never be on our team because you
Yeah.
can't handle the streets. But we
Yeah.
did, again, we were ignorant. We didn't know.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Um, and I guess like before we jump ahead to talking about the organization you've got now, I've sort of heard you talk about what you believe in terms of post-traumatic growth. Would
Mm-hmm.
you touch on that for me?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, what you're seeing in Travis, if you meet me, if you see me on podcasts, this is post traumatic growth. Because, yeah, I always tell everyone there's no magic pill that you're going to forget all the shit that you've seen in your career.
Yeah.
However, we can provide you tools and resources, trainings, therapies to help you get to the other side of it to where you're in a much
Mhm.
better place. my post-traumatic growth, part of that is sharing my story to others in hopes that something I say may resonate with them. Like, hey, if Travis can do it, I can do it, And, I've had the just incredible privilege through social media, my website, whatever. So many people have reached out to me sharing their story, or maybe even saying, Travis, I'm in a bad way. What should I do? And like, okay, let's get you to a therapist. You need to look into EMDR, and they make some progress, and I love hearing about that. And the only thing, because most everyone says, I appreciate this so much. I don't know what I can do. And I'm like, hey, the one thing you can do is promise me when you get on that other side of it, that you tell at least one person your story, So that's post-traumatic growth. And I think we need to celebrate that. I think we need to, in our first responder organizations, like someone is struggling, they come forward to help, they go through the hard work of working through that. That department needs to put them up on pedestal and teach the youngsters, especially, like, hey, this is what this looks like. This career is not going to always be easy. But unfortunately, too many times right now, we kind of shove people off into the corner. Like, oh, they're struggling. Like, let's, put them in a closet for a while, and that kind of bullshit. Which that's not how it should be. So
no, and I'm equally like a massive proponent of post-traumatic growth, and I've definitely experienced it myself, and not in a professional capacity, but more in like a personal one, where I had like a very long-term relationship completely disintegrate and implode in, some of the worst ways possible. And it involved, like, I was shaken to my core because the future that I had envisaged was over. I lost like half of the people that I considered to be my family. Like, and when your core is shaken and your faith in someone that you loved and everything like that is just taken away from you, and you're just so lost, and then you have to find your way in the world again and basically rebuild yourself, rebuild who you want to be, who you think you are, what you want your future to look like. And it's if you get to that other side of it, it's amazing. And it's something that I turned into so that I had the courage to meet my husband and marry him and leave like my life and my career and everything in Australia, and take a chance on my wonderful husband, and 10 years and 2 kids down the track. Well, I mean, Christ, it's amazing, but I would never have had the confidence to do something like that unless I'd gone through that whole process to begin with. And I didn't know what it was. Like, it's like I went through it, but I didn't know what it was until like a therapist friend mentioned it to me, and I went researched and bought a book and read about it. And I'm like, fuck yes, it is so real. And when you have that realization, you're just like, yeah, this is good.
Absolutely.
So now that we have covered a lot of your career and everything like that, actually, just one last question, if I may. Obviously, I think I've heard you mention that when you left work and got into therapy, it was kind of almost more as like a leave of absence. And from my understanding is you believe that you would sort of go back at one point. How were you in a good mental health space that it became apparent that you were kind of just like, I'm done, or it's just, I can't go back and do that?
Yeah. So about probably 6 months into my therapy, Emily and I started talking about, what does this look like? What does this look like going back? And I remember specifically, I asked both Jennifer Cooper and I asked the psychiatrist, I said, what do you guys think? And they're never going to say like, no, you shouldn't go back to work or anything like that. They'd like obviously talk you through it. And my big question was, I know I've made progress, but what does it look like when I go to another call like that? How am I going to act at this point or perform? They said, Travis, we won't know until you're there. They said, you've been through a hell of a lot and it's up to you to decide. And so my wife and I decided that, you know what, 24 years and all the shit, I think I'm good. Which I say that so matter of fact, but it was an extremely difficult decision because this was everything that I knew. There was also, if I put in for retirement, there was no guarantee that the department was going to give it to me, which meant I could lose everything, and then I would start whatever. I didn't, but Emily and I just said, well, I'll go figure something else out. I'll go whatever, work at Amazon. I don't know, whatever. You know. And so we rolled the dice, but it's definitely not. It's not an easy decision. There's even times where still today, like, and I hear about my team doing stuff, and man, I just sometimes I really miss catching or chasing the legit bad guys, that kind of stuff. I don't miss the shit that I had to see. That's for sure. My brain definitely, I think, has told me that, like, you're good. You've got enough shit up there that you have had to be a part of. So
yeah, and I mean, obviously, you had a much more significant career than I did, and we left for very different reasons. But I can empathize with walking away from something that maybe you wouldn't necessarily have had circumstances been different. Like, I never envisaged not being a cop, and I was a detective. I worked at the Armed Crime Squad. I fucking loved it. Like, and again, you miss like those little like fun bits and pieces, and generally like the people. But it's something kind of weird to reconcile when it has been such like a significant part of your life. So I can
agree.
Different circumstances, but I can understand a little bit. So please tell me about the genesis of My Arena, which is what you do now.
Yeah, it's crazy. So the first time that I had ever told anybody in a group setting about everything that I was dealing with was with my team. It was when I made the decision that I was going to put in for retirement. And so I went back and met with them, very condensed. It was only like an hour. I was going to be able to speak with them. Told them about, what I'd been through, what had been going on the last few months. I mean, they knew I was off work for some heavy shit, but they didn't know all the details. Had a great response from that. In fact, before I even left there that day, one of my operators, that he's just a badass, and pretty much like my right-hand person when we were going into the shit, I wanted to put him right in the middle of everything because I knew he was going to do well. And he comes up to me with tears in his eyes. He's like, I thought I was fucked up. He said, I've never heard anybody talk like this, that, the stuff you learned in therapy. And he wanted the name of Jennifer Cooper. So, and from there, that kind of snowballed to where our whole team has been touched by Jen now. And she does, debriefs with them, sound therapy with them, sees many of them, and a one-on-one sessions. And then Emily and I we had already made plans because we had bought property in Montana that we were going to leave Arizona and go up in the mountains of Montana. And a buddy of mine that works up here, and he used to work in the Tri-City, Washington area, which is like Kennewick and eastern side of Washington, Tri-Cities. And we've known each other through the SWAT community for a long time. And he knew I was coming up here, and he said, hey, there's a tactical leadership conference. Would you come up and do a SWAT debrief? So, which that means like one of our hostage rescues or barricades, talk about lessons learned. I'm like, sure, I can do that. Hung up the phone. And some thought came to me like, hey, what if I call him back and say, hey, what if I tell people my story? Because he just recently had heard, I wasn't telling a lot of people. He said, yeah, let's do it. And so go there with a very basic PowerPoint and put on this presentation for a few hours, and had an overwhelming response, a positive response. There happened to be someone in there listening to me that was friends with Andy Stump from Cleared Hot Podcast. Before I was even home, Andy's texting me like, hey, I heard I should have you on my podcast. These guys vouch for you. Let's make this happen. And then kind of snowballed from there. We get asked to go to the National Tactical Officers Conference, Jennifer and I do. And I don't know what point I decided like, oh, I should bring a therapist in to talk with me as well. But I'll pat myself on the back. It was fucking brilliant because it really
I'll give you a virtual tap.
it really works because, I mean, there's people out there like me that are sharing their personal stories, right, of what they've been through. I think the really unique piece is that, and I work with a couple other therapists now here in Montana that travel in state. But as I'm telling my story, like I pause and kind of toss the baton over to them to where they then talk from the clinical side of like, yep, this is why Travis was experiencing this, talking about, oh, those were normal feelings. These are things he could have done different. These are things we would suggest the agency does different. And then they get into this whole thing about cognitive behavioral therapy. What is EMDR therapy? All this stuff. And it just really works. And fuck, Aaron, it just snowballed. And I mean, I honestly, I don't do a lot of advertising for this. It just word of mouth, like someone hears me speak, they go back to their area, like we got to have this person in, and it's kind of freaking went gangbusters. So yeah.
No, but I absolutely love because you're kind of bringing like that real world first responder experience, but then to actually have someone in that psychological capacity explaining like the cognitive and the psychological aspects of it. So it's kind of like, this is causing this. It doesn't mean you're weak. It's actually your physiological reaction. And, it's like, what does, Bessel van der Kolk sort of, it's like a normal reaction to an abnormal situation being trauma. But that's what we're all exposed to constantly.
No, for sure. I'll give you a very perfect example. We were at the National SWAT Conference again this year in Aurora, Colorado. And we're getting towards the end of our presentation. We opened up for questions. And this dude in the back, and he's getting teary-eyed. And we're like, hey, what's up, man? Do you want to share something? He's like, he kind of giggles a little bit. He's like, I just thought I was seriously fucked up. And so, yeah, I mean, but he said, but to hear you guys talk about this, he said, I've never heard like half the shit Travis has went through, I'm experiencing. I didn't know that was a normal human response. And that's where we have been lied to. Because, not educating us, in my opinion, is a lie. I think the resources and the knowledge has been out there for quite some time. And like we talked about earlier, it's incumbent upon organizations, if you want to be in those leadership roles, you need to be searching these things out, right? And so that's kind of what it is. Yeah, with my career, like every time I start out, I'm like, I'm you, you're me. One of you could be up sharing your story of your career. I know you've had horrific things. I'm just going to kind of give you be that bridge, tell you my side, and then also like vouching for these culturally competent first responder therapists, saying these people know what the fuck they're doing. And this is what you look for. You don't just go random Google search of, oh, who do I go to therapy, and just end up on somebody's couch that doesn't know what they're doing. Like it has to be intentional. Like, let's find the right people to connect them to first responders. Cause it is, I mean, it is imperative that we do that, right?
So. No, and I wholeheartedly agree. And that's what, I try to do in my sort of very small way with coaching first responders, because I think that there is such a gap in between going to talk to someone in peer support and going to see a clinician, where I think people fucking get lost. They get lost in the void and they fucking drown. And I'm sort of similar. I don't like put myself out there. It's kind of word of mouth. And I'm sort of that opinion of, if you build it, they will come. So it's kind of like, I'm here if someone wants to come and talk to me, and the people I work with, I really enjoy it. And again, I'm, for anyone who sort of doesn't know, I'm working towards getting my psychology and counseling degree, so I can be a culturally competent therapist for first responders. And that's like exactly like you're saying, that's my hope, that I will, and normally therapists won't sort of necessarily share a lot about themselves, and coaches aren't really necessarily meant to either, but I'm like, no, fuck it, like that's part of me, and that's why I am, or I feel like I can be a person for you to come and speak to. It's because I was a cop for almost a decade. It's because I am married to a firefighter who has been on the job for like, I don't know, over 20 years or something by now. Like, I know what it's like to perform the role. I know what it's like to support someone doing that role. And that's what I want to do. And I'm, 39, and I'm sort of starting the second half of my life in a different career, but I'm so passionate about it that can't wait to be in the position to be able to be doing that for people, in that further capacity on top of my coaching.
That's incredible. Yeah, you touched on a very important point. Like, yeah, I would imagine, the first time you sit down with someone, once you finish all the schooling, or even as you do right now, it is so important for us to hear your background.
Yeah.
Because like I'm thinking in the back of my head, okay, she's a police officer. Yeah, I was in Australia, but she gets what we're doing. Her husband's a firefighter. Okay, let me now listen to more and start building that relationship. And, the same thing with Jennifer. Her dad was a U.S. Marshal. She worked for Phoenix Fire. Brandon, the other guy, he's former military. Gypsy, just by circumstance, being where she is, has been treating first responders for years.
Yeah.
So it's been just like, hey, this is what I do. And, it's so very important to build that trust. And probably some in the therapist community won't necessarily understand that. But until you sit down with one of us, like, I don't know what to tell you, but that's what we need for sure.
Yeah. And that's part of the reason why I feel so passionately about it, because, hearing your experience and so many others, when they go and they speak to someone who just doesn't fucking get it, or they just can't comprehend it, it can do so much damage. And imagine if you had never gone back, if you'd just gone, oh, okay, well, like, I'm fucking fine, and I'm not going to pursue that. And actually, like, it's taken your tenacity in terms of trying to get yourself help and get yourself a competent therapist. That not everyone has that. Not everyone has that in them. And then what does that fucking lead to?
Right.
I mean, like, we know what that fucking leads to, but
that's the unfortunate part, to where we really, I don't want to call it a game, but it's a very risky endeavor that, like, we put people out there that don't know what the fuck they're doing. Because quite honestly, if it probably would not have been for my wife and her getting me to Jennifer, I would have been done. And I've heard too many experiences where, like, yep, they've been, to someone and they don't, screw it. Therapy sucks. They're stupid. It doesn't work, that kind of stuff. But we need to keep pushing them. And the more and more people that are passionate like you are that want to do that, that's what we need.
And thank you. I appreciate you saying that. And I think as well, like, I've sort of spoken about it previously, like my dad passed away by suicide, and he wasn't a first responder by any means, but I am a product of, and I know the outcome of that loss from a child's perspective. So I've, done a lot of things in my life to try to reconcile that. And I've worked on a crisis line, like a suicide crisis line, for a few years when I moved over to Boston, and done a lot of research, and obviously attended the jobs when I was a cop and all that kind of thing. But I know the impact that it has on a child. So again, that's part of, like, my passion towards trying to help that first responder community, because part of the issue that they face is, like you're saying, that either, like, suicidal ideation. We lose so many in that way. And I know what that loss is like, and I know how my life has been shaped by that. And it does, like, and I was very, very young, but that loss has, like, shaped and impacted my life, like my entire life. And not only, like, the circumstances of how I grew up, but how I felt about myself, like the beliefs I had, like feelings of worth. And then even, I've been really fortunate, but, kids whose parents complete suicide also have such higher risks of, completing suicide themselves, suffering from depression. Like, it's that whole fucking gambit. So almost every part of my life is tied into me wanting to move forward with it, because I know what that that loss does to someone, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, we definitely have to keep highlighting that. I think, with Taylor the other day when we did our first podcast, I think that came to me like, shit, we don't even talk enough about that, of what it does to the kids, and that how the risk factors, how much they increase if a parent is committed suicide. We have to definitely touch on that.
Yeah. And I mean, and I guess, I've done a lot of research and personal work, and I now just come at it from a complete place of compassion, because it was weird. Like when I was working at the suicide prevention organization, I was pregnant with my first child, and they asked me to get up and speak at the Massachusetts State Suicide Conference. And as I was writing my speech, I realized that I was going to give birth to my first child at the same age that my dad ended his life.
Oh, shit.
And that really impacted me, because I was like, holy shit, like, I'm beginning my life and beginning this chapter of my life and starting a family, and he had 3 children and was choosing to leave. And it just gave me, I think, so much more compassion than I've had ever known that I could feel towards him, because then I experienced the love of being a parent and then going, fuck, like, you were in so much pain that you still chose to leave,
Yeah.
And I think that, I mean, I'm a very big, empathy and compassion are really important to me, and that's what, I want to offer in the space that I'm trying to feel and all that kind of thing. And I think that's part of the reason why I really love your approach to everything that you're doing. And we spoke about it briefly offline, but the way that you sort of go about it, you're not about like your shock tactics, you're very humble in the way that you go about talking about your experiences and all that kind of thing. And I think you come across with empathy and compassion, I think, for your former self as well as the other people that you're trying to help in that regards.
Well, thank you. We try.
But yeah, like, it's you're quiet and you're unassuming, and there's no ego about what you're doing, and you come from a background where, and in no way a judgment, but like, I think ego would have been incredibly important to being like a SWAT member and a SWAT team leader. Like, that would have sort of been important, and then now you're a leader again, just in like a different capacity, and yet there is no ego about it. It's just this is what I've done, this is what I'm about, I want to help you, pure and simple. And I really value and respect that approach.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, we do, I do share some stories of my career, and part of that is just I think through all the stories we tell, somebody can possibly relate. It's not about like, hey, I'm Mr. Big SWAT guy, or I've never been about that. I mean, there's many other people did a lot more shit than I did. I was very blessed and fortunate to, be able to be on this team. And I, again, won't ever, I don't ever look back like, shit, I wish this wouldn't happen or that happened. All of it's part of me. So, yeah.
Yeah. And that makes sense. And so we did touch on, your organization, My Arena. So you basically go around to places that invite you and you give your presentations. And I think you've mentioned previously that you conduct, or you basically will do an assessment and write a white paper.
Yeah.
For them.
Yeah. So when we started, it was just going around doing our seminars. It started with, I don't know, anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. And now it's really it's grown into pretty much, it's a full day training. And then, just through, having conversations, some people, a couple different departments asked like, hey, would you come in and do an assessment? So we built that from the ground up to where, we'll just come in and assess from, we like to look at a couple critical incidents that agencies have dealt with maybe within the last 12 months. And then we would like to evaluate how you dealt with it after the actual call was done, in regards to how you took care of your people and, the services you provided. And then we talk to the employees, we talk to leadership, and try to get that all together. And then, present them a white paper, which it's really a military term of describing, this is our assessment, this is what you're doing right, this is what our best recommendations, how you can improve, and then go from there. So, it's kind of
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I was just going to say, like, is that sort of coming from your policing perspective as well as, like, is there input from either Jennifer or one of your other psychologists in regards to what they could be doing on that spectrum too?
Yeah, exactly. It's myself and the therapist. We do this jointly together.
Yeah.
So cool. I'm kind of the liaison advocate of, like, hey, this is what you should be doing for your employees. And we get down to the nitty gritty, even how you handle your officer involved shootings and how important it is that, how you deal with your people after that call. And then the therapist, their professional side of it is, what does this look like to deal with these type of critical incidents? And we're a big one on, we believe organizations should have critical incident policies in place that there's some mandatory care for certain incidents. We believe within the first week, and then 30, 60, 90, 120 day mark that they're going back to do check-ins, because studying this stuff and the work that you do, that a lot of times in that first week or even that first month, you still don't even know how you're feeling. Everything's trying to settle. And then we want you to get in there to keep checking in and make sure that everything's okay. So there's pushback on that at times just because of the financial reason. And then a lot of organizations don't like, we've had some unions like, we don't like mandatory. And honestly, what I tell them, let me come there with Jennifer, let's do our presentation, and then let's talk about mandatory. And every time it's wiped it off the board, like, yep, we believe in it, let's do it. So
exactly. No, that makes complete sense. And you were also saying that you have also started a podcast called In the Arena.
Yep.
And so I think you just launched that last Friday, I believe.
Yeah, last Friday was the first day. It was a goal that I had to try to do one in 2023. I mean, I'm sure just you, it's not lost on me that there's so many podcasts out there.
Trust me, that's exactly the same.
Like, for sakes. But I feel that, because because you followed my social media, but if people on here haven't, my biggest go-to throughout the last year was I would do these extended videos on Instagram. And just our human nature is, a lot of times that gets watched for first maybe minute and a half, and then viewership goes way down. So I thought this would be a good way for me to put out some stuff. And I like to be able to get some of my opinions and recommendations out there in a little bit lengthier form. And then I'm also going to interview some guests that they've come through some of the shit and got to the other side, or maybe they're even still working through it and what it looked like for them. So,
and I think sort of, like, we may come at it from slightly different angles and perspectives, but I just love the conversations, and again, just putting it out there of, like, first responders talking about their experiences and then talking about mental health aspects. Like, it's generating conversation, and it's important. And I think that's sort of where I'm, coming from. And like, I love this. I love this so much. And I've met some, and continue to meet some wonderful people through it. Like, as a result, I'm just, getting contacted by people sort of left, right, and center, and be like, hey, if you're after a guest, I'm like, sure, come on. And it's wonderful. And I think, like, just generating those conversations and putting it out there, it's so important, because I think, like, it's that kind of thing. It's like, then someone listening hears something I say or hears something you say, and they go, oh, okay, like, that's fucking normal. Or, like, feeling or experiencing symptoms of, PTSD for that first month is actually normal. And then if it's it, happens after a month, and then it's like 2 or more of these symptoms or one of these symptoms, and it's impacting your life. Like, to actually just hear that in just a very layman's term is going to, I feel like, resonate with people sometimes a little bit more than just the really cold hard facts and figures and all that kind of thing. So
Agreed. Yeah. And I mean, I know you go the same, I guess, angle that I do, is if one person latches onto you, one person latches onto me, and we help save a life, it's
yeah,
fucking all worth it at the end of the
yeah,
day. Right.
yeah,
So, and
no,
it's been fun, watching this little community. I mean, I know, you and me, some other people that are involved. It's fun. And yeah, Taylor and I, this is kind of on the next big picture thing we're thinking of. One of these days, I'm going to put together a conference where I have this little community get together, and we'll do our thing and have breakout sessions for different topics. And
mm-hmm.
I want to do it for first responders, but I also want to do it I want people that, like you, that are therapists or going to school, and they have this passion. Like, I don't know why, but I want to become, I want to help first responders.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to bring in and show you what that looks like.
Yeah.
I can have this big, that's a goal that we're working on, that we're going to put something like that together.
I love that. That's fantastic. I think that would be amazing. So for anyone who would be interested, so I listen to in the Arena on Spotify. That's where it's available at the moment.
At the moment, I think Taylor's doing YouTube, getting that up and running as well. So yeah.
Cool. All right. So go to Spotify and YouTube and search In the Arena with Travis Gribble, and you can jump on and listen to some episodes there. And I'm sure, which we're just about to talk about, our friends over at the Overwatch Collective will have kindly popped my podcast on there, and I'm sure they'll bang your one up too.
Yep. Yeah.
So lastly, I wanted to touch on the Overwatch Collective, which is a wonderful non-for-profit organization and podcast equally as well that we are both affiliated with. So I would love to sort of hear about your connection and partnership with them, and what you guys are working on towards together.
Yeah, for sure. So I had the awesome opportunity to go back to their fundraiser and speak a few weeks ago, and that was awesome. And I got to meet Greg in person, obviously, and his family. And we could not remember how in the hell we ever got connected. I honestly don't know. I don't know if I saw something on Instagram and I'm like, oh, I'm going to start following this person.
Yeah.
And I, quite honestly, it's very simple why I bought into what he's doing as I watch, or his organization. I know as I travel across the country, the number one thing I hear is either I can't find anyone to go and see, or there's no therapists that understand first responders.
Mm-hmm.
So when I started seeing, like, man, this guy is like, he's putting out free sessions for people. It perked my interest. And so I just kept watching. We started communicating. I'm like, this is the organization that I definitely want to get behind, because I mean, and now when I go to my presentations, I play a video of Greg, telling what he does and what he offers, because like Jennifer and I just came back from New York, and the first break, we must have had half a dozen people. There's no one here. There's no one in New York. Well, so I text Greg and I figured, and I'm like, hey, there's people in New York. He's like, yep, we have 2. And so I told everyone, just hold on till the end. I'll play something for you that you'll be able to find. That's just a gigantic resource for us to have, and something I just truly believe in. So pretty simple. Like, he provides free therapy. He is a stopgap. Like, it also takes away excuses. Like, well, I don't feel comfortable going forward to my organization. Well, guess what? Here's an organization that will pay for you to go to these sessions to at least start getting you some help. So I love it.
Yeah. No, equally, like, I got contacted by Kelsey, And
Oh
she
yeah.
just reached out to me just completely randomly and was like, "Oh, hey, I'm part of like this organization. We're looking to expand our services," and they saw that I was a coach for first responders, and they're like, "Would you be interested?" And I was just like, "Okay." Like I looked into them, and they gave me some details and all that sort of thing. And yeah, equally, I fell in love with their passion and their dedication and their message of that one more is one less. And they work tirelessly for what they do. And they now have their own app, the Overwatch Collective app, that you can download from the App Store. And it's almost, it's got like the social media content on it. They've got the audio rooms, which I don't know if you've jumped on one of them. I've jumped on a couple of times. And yeah, like, and it was such like an honor and a privilege to be asked to join on and be one of their resources, because
Yeah.
why wouldn't you? Like, it's, and
No.
yeah, and they're, and I think it was something that you'd sort of mentioned too, about the fact that they're so open about, like, this is where the donation that you guys, this is where it's going, we're funding this many therapists, we're doing this, we're doing this, like, it's all accounted for, which I think is really important in that respect.
I agree. Yeah. In this day and age where unfortunately there's some not-for-profit organizations that have abused the finances and as such. And
Yeah,
so when I saw that, even sold me even more like, hey man, they are putting this out there where the money's going.
yeah,
It is rock solid. So
yeah,
yeah, definitely we are behind them 100%.
yeah. No, me too. And my aim is to get out there for their fundraiser next year. It's just going to depend on what date, but I'm really hoping it. I'm like, my niece is getting married, and I've got like my kids' birthdays around that time of year, so I'm like, crap. But I'm really, really hoping to be able to make it out there one year. So, because like you're saying, it'd be so lovely to come and meet everyone in person. So
Yeah,
it'd be
it
good.
was good.
And one thing that I also did want to mention, that I don't know if people can see, but I am wearing a fancy My Arena t-shirt, which
I got
Travis
my
was, and he's got a hoodie on and a hat. Exactly. So you guys sell merch. So you can go to My Arena website, which I know it's got the
my
LLC in it.
myarenallc.com. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you've got, so Travis kindly sent me a t-shirt. I purchased one of their like racer back singlets that I wear to the gym. They've got t-shirts, they've got hoodies, they've got hats, you've got all kinds of merch.
Yeah.
And I know you were donating a certain portion towards the Overwatch Collective at some point.
Yeah. I was,
Yep.
yeah, leading up to me going out there, I
Right.
ran a sale promotion that I was going to take $5 from every sale, and we were able to present them with $1,500 from sales for our merchandise. So, yeah,
That is
pretty,
amazing. How wonderful.
yeah.
Um,
So, yeah,
so
the
yeah.
merchandise thing, kind of, we don't, it's hard for me to even promote that stuff because, again, it's just weird to me, but um, it's good. We have, on our hoodies, something that says "You're not alone," and then and on the t-shirt. So it's just kind of it's almost like a conversation starter as well. Like someone asks, if you're afraid to start a conversation, say, hey, what's my arena? Well, let me tell you a little bit
Yeah.
about it. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's good.
Yeah. And I think, like you're saying, I sort of agree. I really like the organic nature of word of mouth stuff like
Yeah.
that. I think there's something so pure about it, and it gets it out there without you feeling like it's getting shoved down your throat.
Agreed. And I do have to, yeah, just so everyone knows, like on the wolf, the ruby eye, that's in honor of Ruby.
That's what that
So
means.
that's why we have that there. So
That's
super
amazing.
important, our organization and what we do. Yeah, it's all because of that day that I was blessed to be able to find her. So
Yeah. And just so our listeners know, I have heard you talk about it in other podcasts, but from what you're aware, she is doing good now, right?
she's doing good. Actually, I had just it's been up and down actually within the last year because people heard that there's a possibility I was going to go get to see her. That didn't work out, but I did actually get connected with she was the founder of this organization called Winged Hope. It's in Gilbert, Arizona. But their specific role is they help sexual assault victims. So,
Okay.
and they work closely with police departments. I had no idea that that organization was involved with her. And
Okay.
it's just, I've been able to connect with some things and get some information that really helped. But yeah, she's with her um, adoptive family. That was the first foster care family to take her in after that,
Yeah.
that day. And
Yeah.
so she's still with them. So it was good. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would imagine for her healing, having that consistency would be really,
Oh,
really
yeah.
good for her.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I hope one day you do get to see her again.
I do too. Yep, someday.
All right, Travis. I have taken up a lot of your time, so I'm very much appreciative. I do have 2 final questions, if you will indulge me. So I like to end the podcast on sort of talking about, which, I mean, I think every episode we talk about the fact that there's such a level of darkness that can permeate, our first responder roles and all of the things that we see and all of the things that we must do. And it can, haunt us to a certain extent, which, you've spoken really openly and honestly about. So I appreciate that. The one thing I do like to ask is, what do you do to hold space for your darkness?
Hmm. What I do now is just staying very aware of what's going on in my heart and mind and my body constantly.
Mm-hmm.
I think for all of my career, I did not do that. And just when the darkness would creep up, it would take over. Quite frankly, obviously, I paid the price, but everyone around me did. So I think it's incumbent upon me. I was having a conversation with someone recently to how all this works, and I use the word fascinating, and I never use that word. And I'm like, I like that word for it because it is really, truly fascinating how what goes on up in here and how much control we let it have, how much it dictates what's going on in the rest of our life. So
Yep.
I make sure that I stay grounded. Not every day is perfect. That is not, I still have some pretty shitty days. And,
Yep.
but I also know that it's okay to feel that shitty day,
Yep.
versus I have to just go to this place to cope or do whatever, get rid of it. It's
Mm-hmm.
okay to let your body feel that because sometimes just, it's not good. Um, so yeah, that's what I do. I make a conscious effort to just stay on top and be completely aware.
Yep. No, that makes sense, and I appreciate you sharing that. And the other question that I like to ask is, what can someone in the capacity of whether it's a partner or a friend or a loved one, what can they do to help and support you hold space for your darkness in that respect?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, it's just, and I think this would resonate with many people.
Mm-hmm.
Is I just need to know that they understand, that they see me, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Especially if you're related to the first responder career, most of us are not looking for accolades, pats on the back, a news article, another award.
Yep.
We're just every once in a while need to know that, like, I understand what you're going through. I understand. Thank you for what you're doing. And I know it's not
Yep.
always easy. And that's what I need to hear. I need, people around me. I mean, if people watch my social media, um, I was very hesitant when I started doing this, but I put out some positive messages that I received from people.
Yep.
But it honestly comes from a true, like, holy shit, thank you. And it's so, again, it's like, it's beyond coincidence at this point to where, like,
Yep.
there's been days where I'm like, is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? Like, I
Yep.
don't know if I'm getting through to anybody. And then I'll get a message like, hey, Travis, because of what you said, I started EMDR therapy and I'm doing it. So
Yep.
we just need to know that people hear us and they understand and that we're,
Yep.
making an impact.
Yep.
And I guess that kind of also goes, and then you know how it is, Aaron. I mean, even right now, you're a mom, you're a wife, you're trying to do all this stuff. And a lot of times we get so busy, we don't have a lot of space.
Yeah.
And I was like that pretty much my whole career. Like, I didn't really check in people with them intentionally. And
Yeah.
that's why it's so important now. Like if people reach out to me, like I just want them to know I hear you. I'm acknowledging your message. I'm going to do what I can, to help you.
Yeah.
And I think we just need more of that. Because you listen to me, I preach so often. Buddy checks and intentional conversations with that core group of people that you have. You can't take care of 30 people, but you can have, your circle to where I'm going to always have some space for you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't care what I got going in my life, but if you call me and like, hey, I'm having a hard time, I know Travis is going to be there. I know Erin's going to be there. And we need to do more of that for one another for sure.
Yeah. No, and that really resonates with me, because something that I'm not like hang my hat on, but I pride myself on, is being a really good friend. And I think that part of that intentionality is anyone that I love knowing like they need me, I'm there. And I think that's
awesome.
like super important.
Yeah. And I think like you talk about, holding space for your darkness. Like, hey, people know that if you come to Aren, like I got some space for you, because some of us, some people just don't, and that's okay. I think we all can get to a place where we can have space for other people as well.
Yeah.
But it's very important that you let those around you know that, hey, I've got some space for you if you need it. So.
Yeah, exactly. And I think when I emailed you the other day, like I shared the Brené Brown quote about where the name of, this podcast and my motto originated from. And it's about knowing your own darkness well. It helps you be present with the darkness of others. And I can confidently and comfortably say that, I have dealt with my own shit to the point where I'm like, I'm good. And again, I'm not perfect, and I'll have my good days and bad days. And there's been stuff that I've had to address in the last 12 months that really kind of, took me back a few steps. But again, like when you know that you're good, and then you can have that capacity to hold that space or that darkness or whatever else for people, like I think it's just part of who I am, and it's part of what is my makeup, and what, you almost kind of feel guilty because I get such joy out of doing that for others. So
no, agreed. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We will wrap it up there. Mr. Travis Gribble, this has been an absolute honor. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to post in the show notes a link to Travis's My Arena website. Go and buy merch. If you can't buy merch from Travis, jump on the Overwatch Collective and go buy merch from them. If you are in a position and have the capability to donate, please donate to the Overwatch Collective. Everything you donate goes towards helping fund therapy, coaching, all of the services for first responders, military veterans, and their spouses and loved ones. And it's a very worthy cause. And both Travis and I are behind them 100%. So I will also post the link for your In the Arena podcast. I will attach Travis's Instagram handle and information. So there will be all of the ways that you can get in contact. And equally, if you are interested in having Travis come and speak to your first responder community or your police department or anything like that, I really encourage you to reach out. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. This has been I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness. My name has been Erin Jane. And as always, let me listen in a way you've never been heard. Thank you.